honor Liberia's long-ruling President William Tubman.
The country had been ruled since the 1930s by a man called William Shadrach Tubman Jr., who smoked cigars, wore Homburgs, and appeared at official functions in tails.
President Tubman was an Americo-Liberian, a member of Liberia's ruling class, many of whom were descendants of the freed American slaves who founded the country in 1847.
Liberia was one of the very few parts of Africa that had not been colonized by a European power. It was settled in its more or less modern configuration by freed American slaves, and this group became known as the Americo-Liberians.
The Americos had established their own brand of servitude, which excluded from power local ethnic tribes like the Pele, the Bassa, the Kru.
The Americo-Liberians, to some extent, replicated the society that they left in the United States, but they became the plantation owners, and the Liberians became the workers. Not surprisingly, the workers sort of resented this status.
Life in much of Liberia mirrored the plantations of the American South. Some saw echoes of that at Firestone.
The entire structure of the work on the plantation was like in the South. That means you had laborers, and you had headmen, you got gang leaders, you have overseers, the same thing that used to in the South to control the workforce.
The people at Firestone imported here a lifestyle. And it was a lifestyle that was designed for the Americans who came from the United States to work for Firestone.
Officers on the plantation lived very nicely in attractive, comfortable, well-furnished homes. Their lifestyle was obviously on a plane greatly superior to the Liberians who were working with them.
The plantation had over 8,000 workers, most of them tappers.
I had never seen something like this in my life before. This scene of the tappers with the buckets slinging on their shoulders, moving around, emptying the cups of latex one after the other, and going to the truck and emptying it there and so forth.
Collecting sap was grueling work, sometimes done by entire families for a few dollars a day.
It's hard work, it's demeaning, and the pay is very small. If someone tries to complain, even though we were later, but we hear them say, well, if you try to complain, people tell you, aren't you counting yourself lucky that you have a job? You got to stop complaining. So people just live with it like that.
Liberian middle managers had it a little better.
I'm Justin Knuckles. I was hired in Firestone in the year 1973, and I worked for Firestone inferior position up to 1990. The firehouse I have, what I can say was terrible because you had to get up and go and use the bathroom outside. You got to do everything outside, and a lot of flies. It was terrible.
The houses have now changed, but up to 2002, that was the type of housing they had. No running water, and about 90% of the people live in that condition.
But in one of the poorest countries in the world, Firestone offered its workers generous benefits.
I got a scholarship coming from junior high school because I was the second in my class. And then I got a scholarship again to go to college. So they pay my tuition in college.
I can say you consider yourself blessed. A good educational program. They give you food, they give you water. You didn't make much money, but for men to live, you got to have certain things. And Firestone provide those things.
But the Firestone workers were not immune to the resentment that was building across Liberia. After 133 years of Americo-Liberian rule, a young enlisted man from the Kron tribe changed the course of Liberia's history on April 12, 1980.
Liberia's president, William Tolbert, a descendant of American slaves and a good friend of the U.S., was assassinated today in a coup led by an army enlisted man who said that they're fed up with the government corruption. The new head of the government is the 28-year-old sergeant named Samuel Doe.
Master Sergeant Samuel Doe eviscerated Tolbert in bed, disemboweled him. Doe then invited the world's press to come to Liberia to witness the execution of all the cabinet ministers that he could lay his hands on.
It was very shocking, really, because of the way they executed the cabinet, who were old men, who were civilians. I think people would expect them to be locked up after a coup. They wouldn't expect them to be tied on the beach outside town and shot.
The execution of the Tolbert cabinet on the beach, broadcast live on Liberian television, sent a pretty clear message that this was his country to control.
For the first time since its birth, Liberia was no longer run by these mulatto, lighter-skinned Libero-Americans, but from someone from the interior.
Doe gradually filled government posts with members of his Kron tribe, many who were uneducated and ill-prepared to run a country. One of the notable exceptions was Charles Taylor, who had recently returned from Boston, where he had received a degree in economics from Bentley College. He worked his connections and became the head of the General Services Agency.
Doe, who was a pretty uncultured man at the time, had the good sense to put Taylor in charge of the office, which appropriates funds for government purchases.
Taylor used the position to gain influence with Doe's staff. He bought new cars for the cabinet and surprised Doe with a stretch limousine. But as head of procurement, there were other opportunities.
As you can imagine, that was a very lucrative job, and he made a lot of money. And nobody really minded until the money he made was President Doe's money, and then he fell out with the president and fled to the United States.
Doe accused Taylor of embezzlement, demanding his extradition. Taylor was arrested and locked up, but not for long.
Charles Taylor makes a rather dramatic prison break from a jail in Massachusetts, along with several other inmates. All of those inmates are eventually captured. Taylor is not, and regales in the afterwards that it was the CIA who helped break him out of that prison because he was destined to lead the rebellion to bring down Samuel Doe.
There's all kinds of legend around it, but it seems he had a kind of underground network of people who helped him. He literally disappeared. Nobody knew where he was.
We'd heard all the rumors that he had been to the States and escaped from jail and was making his way back to Liberia.
4 years after the jailbreak, Taylor's forces began their assault, heading towards the Firestone plantation. Day 1, Tuesday, June 5th, 1990. Last evening, 8 p.m., reported rebels crossing river towards factory area. Donald Ensminger was the head of the Firestone plantation when Taylor's rebels stormed in and seized control. Much of what we know about what happened comes from Ensminger's diary and a phone interview. He declined to appear on camera.
I found him to be very genuine, very nice man, genuinely cared for us as expats and for the rest of the people who work for Liberia.
We found Ensminger to be very rude, very uncooperative, and a very arrogant son of whatever.
In his diary, Ansminger notes that 8 to 10 rebels burst into the golf club, demanding vehicles. Later on, they took fuel, bags of rice, handheld radios, and petty cash, including $40 to the rebel leader, Peter, a hothead and drunk. Ken Gerhardt was stationed down the road from the plantation at the Coca-Cola bottling plant, a property of Firestone. He was in constant communication with Ansminger.
We still had radio communications, he and I. And, well, they were saying things were heating up because they were getting so many demands from Taylor's army. Money, food, whatever, you know. They wanted whatever they could get. And unfortunately, when they couldn't get it, they would go out in the villages and take what they wanted. So things were really heating up.
We knew we were going to be out for trouble. They go into your house if you had a private vehicle, or even Firestone vehicle parked in your yard. They would take the vehicle, take valuables. I mean, they said that they were at war with Mandingos and Crowns. So they were looking for Mandingos and Crowns, and as they identified them, they were killing them.
President Dough's forces, the AFL, were mainly Cron. Dough gave the order to push Taylor off the plantation.
Never came into, got on the scene and targeted people from other places and killed them. This was a kind of a seesaw, a battle that was happening.
And it appeared, from my perspective, that it was turning more into a tribal warfare, in essence. Doe, who was a Cron from the Cron tribe, certainly didn't have any love loss between some of the other tribes that were apparently joining in the rebellion with Charles Taylor. And we knew that people were getting killed. We knew that it was very dangerous for them. From my perspective, a little apprehensive to determine what we would have to do, whether it would be safe for us to stay on the plantation or whether we would have to evacuate.
The U.S. Embassy had advised U.S. citizens to evacuate, but the managers stayed put. On June 7th, day 3, thousands of Firestone workers fled their homes. Steve Ramo took these photos. Many of the workers sought shelter at Ansminger's mansion.
We started to see people walk towards the house. And like then more, and we estimated somewhere around 1,500 people were standing in front of the general manager's house seeking refuge. They were crying, they were afraid, and they wanted refuge.
Many of the expats, too, gathered at the main house.
We would, during the day, kind of try and keep ourselves occupied. So I still played golf. Some of the other guys did too. And we just watched to see what would occur. We were hoping that once they had this initial battle, that things would move off the plantation. That was my hope anyway.
As the battle raged, Firestone workers continued to seek refuge at the main house. But Ansminger says he had no other choice but to turn them away.
They told us that he cannot take us in because we are the ones who will be protecting him, not he protecting us.
He said, it's Liberians that are coming. You are going to be safe among your own people. You don't need to come in. So only the expats can come in, not the Liberian staff. It made me feel very bad that that present management did not care about the well-being of the black staff. Hell was breaking loose, and they didn't care for them.
We were concerned about them because certainly being a part of the tribe that Doe was a part of, we knew that they were going to be targeted. But as far as being able to protect them, we had no way to do that.
It was a very emotional moment to say to all these people, I'm sorry. We cannot harbor you, we cannot protect you. I felt like crying. It was sad, very sad. In fact, I get choked up, like I'm nearly getting choked up now each time I tell this story. And it was very emotional.
Another entry in the diary says that the workers were fed rice and told to leave. We can't offer them protection from either soldiers or FF. FF freedom fighters, a reference to Taylor's forces. By day 4, heavy fighting erupted between Taylor's rebels and Dough's army. Like many workers on the plantation, Mary Poley had no place to go.
I started working in Firestone. My husband and myself were met there on a Division 1.
She recalls the day Dough's forces barged into her house, looking for Taylor rebels.
When Chatera came in, they were killing. Government, those soldiers were killing. Too much killing. And where I was at, my husband, he took my husband from me one morning. They stripped him naked, no clothes. He only lived in his brief. They carried him from me. I crying. They kicking me. They killed my husband way behind the bench hall. They killed my husband. I never lay my eye on the body. They came back on me, raped me. They wanted to kill me and my children. The next morning, dinner break was 3 o'clock in the morning. I left with my children. I jumped in the bush.
Day 9, we are totally helpless.
The final blow was when they came to his house where he had assembled so that they could be together. And one of them threatened to shoot him with an RPG if he was there the next day. And then we got them all out and left the country.
After 10 days, Ensminger ended his diary with these words. But for the Firestone employees on the plantation, the ordeal was just beginning. Justin Knuckles awoke to find a note from management on his door.
We're sorry we're going to stay. Hope to return when things improve.
And how did that make you feel?
Very, very insecure. Because we had a belief, as long as the Americans are on the plantation, we had a little hope. But now the Americans are gone. What's going to happen to us?
Over the course of the next several months, the killing continued.
Well, if they're the right tribe, they survived. If they weren't, they didn't.
Gerhardt's employees at the Coca-Cola bottling plant were not spared.
I had approximately 350 people, and 17% of them had been killed. My driver, my secretary. The story that bothered me the most was my driver. First time he was beaten. Second time they cut the soles off his feet. Third time they shot him.
They cut the soles off of his feet?
Yeah, right. With a machete. It changed my whole perspective of what was happening in the country. No longer did any of us feel that it was going to be a swift coup and so forth, and human rights would be, adhered to, but they were not. It had pretty much got really out of hand then.
Over the following months, competing factions fought for control of the country. It was a civil war, marked by atrocities on all sides. After months of bloodletting, Taylor and his NPFL gained the upper hand. By the fall of 1990, Taylor had seized most of Liberia, with the exception of Monrovia. The capital was still up for grabs, contested terrain. And President Doe became the most prominent casualty. He was captured and stripped to his underwear by a former Taylor commander, the warlord Prince Johnson. Elizabeth Blunt was trying to set up an interview when gunfire erupted.
I was stuck in the press officer's office with a gun battle going on all around me. While I'd been lying there with my eyes shut, I heard the president's voice, which must have been when they were taking him away, and I heard what I was sure was the president's voice going, "Please, I beg you," and I knew his voice. He was bleeding very heavily. I think he probably just died from loss of blood, but they were trying to interrogate him. He died sometime during the night.
It's hard to process sometimes. Certainly, evil was taking reign in Liberia. When evil is given opportunity to reign freely, these things occur, and we experience them.
In the late 80s, 40% of the latex used in America came from Firestone's plantation in Liberia. In the industry, Firestone's product was considered some of the highest quality latex in the world. At company headquarters, top managers were under pressure to get the Liberia operation back up and running.
When you can't produce latex, can't produce block rubber, can't get it sent out to the end users, I would assume we were losing lots of money.
It was a big deal because it was their own source of rubber for the tires. And it was the largest plantation in the world, and they had a market established over many, many years, so it was very important to them.
Firestone had been bought by the Japanese conglomerate Bridgestone in 1988, and the corporation had been losing money. Except to plot their return.
Firestone's intent was to make money. Always has and always will. We're in the business to make money. So if it's not making money, let's make it so it does. Why did we go back? Because we felt sorry for the people that were there? Probably not. We wanted to get the investment earning money again.
One of the first things management did was hire a Liberian attorney based in the U.S.
The meetings actually took place in Akron in 1990 at the old big Firestone headquarters, a big building there in Akron. The discussions focused on what to do next. Would you have to deal with Charles Taylor? Could you do that? There was tremendous worry about the safety of their employees, most particularly the 8, 9, 10,000 Liberians that they employed. So how can we help these people? What do we do next? So it was a real dilemma for the company, and a lot of, I would say, soul searching and really tough decision making that had to be done.
Much of what we know from the era comes from corporate records that until now were buried in a long-forgotten court file, and hundreds of State Department cables obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. One of the earliest documents we found was a letter signed by Donald Ensminger on October 3, 1990. It's addressed to Commander-in-Chief Charles Taylor, requesting a meeting. The second one, sent a week later, all sides need to recognize that Firestone continues to incur major losses as a result of hostilities. Then, 3 months later, one of Taylor's aides sent a letter back to Akron. President Taylor has directed us to inform you that your team should come to Harbel to make the necessary assessment of the plantation. A few weeks later, a small group of Firestone managers headed back to Monrovia.
We were each given a survival kit. That's your responsibility. The mission is to go back and the plantation, start up the plantation.
The managers had been away from Liberia for 8 months. They were shocked by the country they found.
It's a disaster completely. I saw very few dogs left, everything been eaten. All the palm trees have been cut down for the cabbage on top because everybody was starving to death. No cats. And if you saw a rat, he was big because he'd been well fed. On the streets, when I started driving around, you would be driving over human bones on the streets. You couldn't miss them.
The managers found it hard to get to the plantation. Taylor was making life difficult for them.
The rebels were on the plantation and up to the suburbs of Monrovia. The higher management was talking about getting back onto the plantation. But I think we realized that somebody didn't want us to go back to the plantation.
So they waited. In Monrovia, there was an uneasy peace. The city was in the hands of an interim government, but the interim president was president in name only.
The U.S. had abandoned us. The United States government was very clear that there was not to be the nature of the intervention that many Liberians expected.
The concern I had was that there was an interim government without any constitutional basis. There was Charles Taylor, who by force of arms had taken most of the country. And these two different governments from a legal or constitutional aspect had no legitimacy, if you will.
The task of keeping law and order was delegated to a West African peacekeeping force that went by the acronym ECOMOG.
The acronym got converted by Liberians into every car or movable object gone, because these West African peacekeepers spent most of their time stealing things and looting the country and shipping it back, in most cases, to Nigeria.
For Taylor, they were foreigners, war tourists, posing for pictures. Without a foothold in Monrovia, Taylor set up a parallel government in what he town of Banga.
Taylor called himself president. He called his wife of the time the First Lady. He called his house in Banga the Executive Mansion, but it was a house. It wasn't an executive mansion. The Minister of Communications basically was the guy who carried the satellite telephone. He wasn't a Minister of Communications.
The only thing he's interested in is absolute power, and he has it nearly out in the areas he controls, not only by the landmass, but because that's where Liberia's riches are. That's where the rubber is, that's where the timber is, that's where the diamonds are. Why come to Monrovia? There's nothing there to exploit.
As Taylor's ambition for money and territory grew, he expanded his reach to neighboring Sierra Leone. He recruited thousands of new fighters, many of them children. For his own presidential guard, Taylor created a special division of young boys.
They were formerly called the Small Boys Unit. They were very young boys, very often orphans, that somehow became like his sons, and they would do anything for him. And they manned these roadblocks across the country, wherever the front lines were. They adopted horrifying names like General Me Quick, Dead Body Bones. Got to the point where they would bet, if a pregnant woman was walking towards the roadblock, they would lay bets on what sex the fetus was. And they would open her up with a bayonet to see. And they would just dump the bodies right there.
Mr. Taylor seemed quite proud of his SBU, Small Boy Unit. All of them were the Taylor shock troops. There was also a lot of drugs that were circulating and probably administered or encouraged by the MPFL. So it was a pretty, in some ways, disorganized, easy, but also terrifying kind of a phenomenon to be rushed by a lot of folks pretty much out of their heads.
During this war, we picked these kids up in villages on the highway. You take them home. You feed them, you give them a bath, you tell them, okay, you are my SBU. Everybody wanted to be a soldier. This war was ugly. I saw skulls. I saw dogs eating bodies. I saw bloated bodies. I saw exploding bodies. I saw women dead. I saw children dead. I saw babies dead. I saw war. I can't apologize for war. Everybody has had a war.
There was widespread killing and torture. 2/3 of the Kron, Doe's tribe, fled the country.
He didn't do all of that firsthand himself. I mean, he let his boy soldiers do that because there was no control of them. He knew what was going on, but he didn't know who was doing what, when, or where.
We knew there had been, there had been fighting, there had been killing, and there had been some ethnic reprisal killings. But at that time, from the information available to me, and I think to Firestone, Taylor did not appear to be conducting genocidal activities or war criminal or anything of that kind. And indeed, the United States government had not discouraged Firestone from contacting Taylor and seeing what could be done.
But Donald Ensminger told us Firestone was getting reports about the atrocities being committed. Human Rights Watch had warned publicly that the Kron tribe was at risk of genocide. And in reports, even the State Department had said Taylor's NPFL forces had been killing civilians, primarily based on ethnic considerations. Liberia's Truth and Reconciliation Commission would later collect data on the violations committed by the NPFL during the Civil War. ProPublica tallied the numbers for the first year of the invasion. 6,424 killings, 820 kidnappings, and 631 rapes. The U.S. did not recognize Taylor's self-declared government, but U.S. diplomats had tried to engage with him. Assistant Secretary of State Herman Cohen, who was the top-ranking official in the State Department for Africa, had in earlier months made a trip behind rebel lines to meet with Taylor.
It was rather frightening because his compound was surrounded by young boys, I would say ages 12 to 14, all carrying heavy weapons. We go inside and Charles Taylor is sitting there on a kind of a throne. It looked like a throne. And the first thing that struck me is he had behind him was hanging a large picture of President John F. Kennedy and Mrs. Kennedy. It was up. So he saw himself like that. He saw himself as a great leader who would bring Liberia to the modern age, you see. And he said to me, you know, if you want to stop this war, just send in a battalion of Marines. We'll all surrender, he said. We'll all surrender. U.S. Marines, we all surrender.
Around that time, the U.S. was embroiled in the Gulf War. Military intervention here was not an option.
I sent word back to Washington, and word quickly came back. Secretary Cohen, you are under instructions not to take charge of this war, so please do not do that. So I said, okay, and I went about my business.
After months of waiting, the Firestone managers were growing restless. They were holed up in a compound in Monrovia, unable to work on the plantation.
We asked, could we go to a plantation, talk to the rebel forces there, and we want to start the plantation again. We thought that would be enough incentive for them to say, yeah, come back. But that wasn't the case.
Taylor was ignoring Firestone. He may also have taken offense to the tone in Ensminger's letters. They were not fawning. They were all business. They didn't even address him as president. Looking for a breakthrough, Ensminger decided to visit Taylor in Bonga. He asked Ken Gerhardt to come along.
Well, we were hopeful that we were going to get a little more latitude on what we want to do on the plantation. That was our hopes of going up there. But it didn't happen. He did not meet with us. He wouldn't meet with us. We slept on the hard floor all night from one room he gave us and went back the next day.
From the cables, we know that some U.S. diplomats were discouraging Firestone from dealing with Taylor. One cable from January 1991 reads, "We would recommend that Firestone wait until the plantation area comes under ECOMOG control."
In my personal opinion, not the U.S. government's opinion, I did not feel that Firestone was operating in the best interest of what I saw as our best interest in Liberia. Their choice of becoming closer to Taylor was not the appropriate way that I would want to see them do business, but I'm not in the rubber business.
Other diplomats accepted Firestone's attempts with Taylor.
I think that it's fair to say that we recognize that the most likely outcome was that Taylor was going to continue to control that territory.
You can't close down a plantation. You can't wrap up, 5 million trees and take them away. So you want to preserve what you can, and so you have to make deals.
At least one ambassador, Peter John DeVos, encouraged Firestone to work with Taylor and even secured a meeting in Bonga, which included a delegation of diplomats and a surprise guest. Fourth in line was Donald Ensminger.
Mr. Ensminger, who's the Director General of Firestone.
Oh, he works for the embassy now?
Well, yeah, we work for him.
America works for Firestone. Taylor was blunt, accusing Firestone of negligence.
Thousands of people out there have put their whole lives in this, 20, 30 years. There's a little war, and then you run off, and there's no food, no medicine, there's complete breakdown. That's inexcusable. I don't think Firestone should do such a thing.
After the meeting, an official at the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia wrote back to state. The cable notes that Ensminger was scolded by Taylor in front of the entire press corps. After that meeting, Taylor refused to deal with Ensminger.
After Ensminger's first mistake, when he came to Banga, he was very demanding. They just wanted what's for Firestone to be for Firestone. And after the talks broke off, we insisted that they have to send someone we can work with.
Naturally, Taylor everything his way, and Don didn't. He wanted it Firestone's way. So it's probably two guys butting heads.
Firestone sent Ensminger's boss in Akron, John Schremp, to get things back on track.
John Schremp was another guy. They came, they met with Taylor, and Taylor said, look, you abandoned your people. What about them? When you come back, what can you do for them? What are you going to give them back pay? What?
Charles Taylor insisted on a number of conditions. Among them would be that the Firestone would recognize that he had a de facto government, and that if Firestone came back, it would treat his government as the Liberian government and the government that it must deal with.
Besides those demands, Taylor made one more ultimatum. Ensminger had to go.
Did Firestone essentially acquiesce to Taylor's demands?
Yes, absolutely. It was clear that without that, you would not be able to put a management team on the ground.
Soon after, Ensminger was dismissed. In an email to ProPublica and Frontline, Ensminger wrote that he disagreed with Firestone's direction, saying, "I felt then, as I do now, that their approach pushed to the very limits legality and morality." It had been a year and a half since Taylor took over the plantation. Firestone was losing money, and it was worried about reports that the plantation was being ransacked. The board of directors sat down to discuss its options.
We assumed they were making their own arrangements. They wanted to stay in business, and they would do whatever is necessary to stay in business.
They were prepared to do Taylor's bidding. If Taylor says, I'm president, I'm at least de facto president, then they said, well, we see the de facto president and we do business with that president.
The easy answer for Firestone, in my opinion, would have been to just say, we're out of here. It's risky, it's scary, economically it doesn't make any sense. So we're just gonna shut it down and walk away. But if you felt a sense of responsibility to Liberia, and most importantly, to the workers, people you work with for years, it had no other choice. The decision was to stay.
They had a choice. They had a choice. I don't understand this notion of not having choice over the corpses of Liberians. What is that supposed to mean? Choice to become a launch pad to rain war on Liberians? I don't accept it.
It's about making money. It's not about the people who help to create the wealth. It's not about the country. It's profit, profit, and profit.
On December 17th, 1991, the board agreed to make a deal with Taylor. It was a pivotal moment for the company. In exchange for being able to return to operations, Firestone would make a significant capital investment to restore the plantation. The company would agree to use a shipping port under Taylor's command. Taylor would reciprocate by offering security for the managers at the plantation. The documents also showed that the deal would ultimately include, quote, tax payments. In careful columns and rows, internal company records show a schedule of tax payments, including income taxes, Social Security payments, and rent, equipment, and rice, valued at $2.3 million.
I had not seen this, and it's kind of amazing that it is so broken down by columns. And who the hell are the pension beneficiaries? It's amazing, isn't it?
You know, until now I hadn't seen this. But with this, I can say very clearly that Firestone was in complicity. And I wish our government today would raise this issue with Firestone. I think the Liberian people deserve some explanation to these types of transactions. I think so.
We presented the documents to the current president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
This is one document that has not been brought to my attention, although you do hear rumors that Firestone paid taxes, to the Taylor government and whatnot. But at this stage, quite frankly, we don't know. And sometimes we don't even want to know. We just want to proceed.
The deal between Taylor and Firestone was sealed and made official in a memorandum of understanding. It was a significant victory for Taylor.
I suspect he felt this would be a feather in his cap in the eyes of Liberians. So I would think that that was something he wanted.
We wanted Firestone on the ground because it gave credibility. One, for every employee at Firestone, as little as they get, they have about a secondary and tertiary family of 8 people. So for 1,000 people, you're affecting their lives and providing sustenance for 8,000 people. We needed Firestone to keep people busy.
The agreement was neatly laid out on Taylor's stationery with its telltale scorpion emblem.
I was not party to it, so I can't really comment. Basically, I refused to sign any paper with Charles Taylor's name on it. But I believe they did do that in order to open back up.
In our investigation, we found a letter on microfiche from the Firestone executive John Schremp to the interim government. He insisted the company was not taking sides with Taylor's government, the NPRAG, and he expected hostilities would soon end. He wrote, "In the end, we had no viable choice but to accede to the preconditions set by the NPRAG for our return to the plantation. Our choices were stark. Either generate some income or abandon our employees and mothball the plantation."
For Firestone, it was either you don't go back or you have to acquiesce and pay taxes to the government in control of that area. They did the right thing. They did not exploit the country. They did not seek to extract resources on some special deal. They did not pay off warlords or give money under the table. Didn't do any of those things. They did the right thing.
Firestone agreed to pay its Liberian workers in American dollars, and it would study the possibility of providing power and safe drinking water to workers' homes. Firestone would also make all arrangements necessary for settlement of present and future financial obligations to Taylor's government. The MOU was executed in the city of Bonga on the 17th day of January, 1992.
I don't think that Firestone thought about it in moral terms. I think Firestone thought about it in purely utilitarian terms. Taylor can provide us the security that is necessary in order for us to continue our operations. We gave him a little bit. He gave us some slack here, and we do business.
A month after the signing of the MOU, a small group of expats was finally allowed to restart operations at the plantation. For the managers, it was a huge letdown.
The factory was just a mess. So when I went back, I managed to get to my house and it was torn apart. Nothing in it.
Our homes had been destroyed, in essence ransacked. None of our furniture was left anymore. Everything else that they could carry away was carried away. So we lived in Monrovia and then would travel out to the plantation once in a while, check on things, just look around a little bit, see if there had been any progress made.
The managers were not allowed near Ensminger's old house. They understood that the plantation effectively had a new boss.
Taylor's the mayor. Okay. We actually called him Mr. President on the plantation. That was his title. I was impressed with the man. He was articulate, spoke well. He talked about his plans for Liberia. I felt that this gentleman was, and I call him a gentleman because he acted like one when I saw him, was going to definitely be the future president of Liberia.
Throughout the summer of 1992, the Firestone managers worked hard to get along with Taylor. The change was brought about by Donald Ensminger's replacement, Don Wahey. Wahey was a genial, hands-on manager with experience. He had run the plantation in the 80s and had close connections with Liberia's ruling elites. He passed away in 2010.
I think Don understood. He communicated a lot better. But I think that's who Don was. I didn't sense any racism in him. He didn't have that plantation mentality in the course of normal conversation. And so he built up a lot of confidence with Taylor.
I thought he was a good administrator, a good diplomat, let's put it that way. He's trying to keep, let's say, Taylor's people happy, Firestone happy, and kind of balance it all together.
Under Wahey, Firestone brought in food, hired back workers, and began rebuilding the plantation. Despite the improving conditions, the workers were still wary of management.
They gave us a hard time because we ran away. That's the term that they used. And that was from the regular worker in the factory up to people that were considered the top families of the country. You would get into a discussion, and if it ever turned to that, their looks would change and said, but you ran away.
The expat managers were determined to win the workers back.
We were bringing in rice again, so food, allocation of rice, and we were trying to get medical supplies to the hospital so that you could treat some basic illnesses. By doing that, hopefully that got some of the trust back.
Court documents show that Firestone spent $35.3 million on the plantation and its employees between June 1990 and February 1993.
It's a cash economy, so I didn't have the opportunity to even write a check. You know, where would they cash it? It was in a closet. That's where we kept the money. Absolutely, literally a closet, and it was $5 Liberian dollars stacked from floor to ceiling in this closet.
After 6 months, the operation was back up and running. Ambassador DeVos's replacement, William Twaddell, asked Wahey if he could get a tour of the new facilities.
It looked pretty good, but he didn't, on Wahey, nor did anyone else say, we are overrun or fear being overrun by NPFL. I think they were living with the NPFL among them.
We can't take the plantation and say, well, let's pretend it's over here and he's not there. He's there and he's in charge and he's got the guns. Should we have waited? Probably. Yes, I will agree that that's a probable better answer. But we decided that it was doable, and we decided to try.
Taylor later acknowledged that the deal with Firestone had been particularly important during the early years of his revolt.
Was Firestone startup capital in some way for Taylor's government?
I can't answer that because I just don't know the answer to that. I would say no. In the grand scheme of things, these all would have been relatively small amounts.
And did Taylor use the farm to store weapons and ammunition?
Not to the best of my knowledge. He certainly, if he did that, it would not have been with the knowledge or acquiescence of the Firestone management.
There's no way the company management will say they're not aware of it. They were aware. How would the management not be aware? The Firestone facilities, they are providing the fuel. They have the fuel stations. You know, they have the supplies.
I think Firestone was giving them most of what they needed. Firestone gave them rice. Firestone gave them gasoline. They needed gasoline for all of the cars they ran. And they had taken some Firestone vehicles and they were using them.
Despite accounts of Taylor's forces being out in the open on the plantation, Firestone managers say they had no way of knowing what he was planning next.
You got to realize that you couldn't see very far in the plantation because everything is trees and tall trees to boot. So your vision was very restricted.
Vaguely, I think we saw a convoy of vehicles go through. But then again, we were concentrating on getting the factory running.
While the managers focused on the plantation, Taylor was arming for the next phase in the war.
People in Monrovia know that Charles Taylor is exporting raw materials. They know he's making money on timber. They know he's making money on diamonds. What is he making? What is he spending that money on? Weapons.
Firestone's money was one source of revenue. Taylor had branched into other lucrative businesses, trafficking in iron ore, gold, timber, and diamonds.
In looking at these conflicts, it's always good to follow the money. And Taylor was able to generate significant amounts of money. He was able to buy seemingly unlimited arms and ammunition from Eastern Europe. He was able to have them flown in to Roberts International Airfield and other covert locations. And he was able to arm a very large group of fighters. So it appeared to us that Firestone, among others, was financing at least a part of Taylor's insurrection.
Then, one night in mid-October 1992, Taylor made his move, an all-out assault on Monrovia. Operation Octopus. The sound of shelling startled the ambassador at the U.S. Embassy.
Well, the day began in the dark hours. I don't know if it was 3 or 4, but it was, there were some booms and a pretty continuous barrage that went on 3 or 4 or 5 days. It was pretty wild.
The first few days were very, very touch and go. Taylor forces got quite close. The perimeter shrunk to probably 2 miles or so. And you always had a flak jacket hanging up in your office.
The siege of Monrovia was brutal. Scores of Taylor's young boys died crossing the swamps leading into the city. After a week of heavy fighting, Taylor's offensive stalled in Monrovia's suburbs. Ecomog decided to take the upper hand.
The plantation had been turned into a major military installation. Firestone provided the backdrop for this, provided the rear base, the rear guard base, provided the ammunition depot from which ambushes could be set, and all of this could happen. That operation needed to be dismantled.
Ecomog set out to destroy Taylor's stronghold on the plantation.
We're watching the planes dive and dropping the bombs and pulling up, and it was just, oh, that's cool. Look at that. Hey, it's a show. It's not going to bother us. We're safe.
Reminded me of the Second World War, looking for doodle bugs in the sky. And we would look to see where they were, to see possibly where the bombs would land. But you never had an idea of that. You didn't know where they were going to land.
And then, just as a group of workers and children had gathered to play a game of soccer, Ecomog jets appeared in the sky.
There were guys on the football field playing, and then the next thing we saw, they started releasing bomb. And people started running. And the direction people were running in, that's where they were going, they're releasing bomb. People lynched, got caught and stuff like that. And then, they were running to the hospital here and there. They were, it was just terrible.
Around 40 people were killed.
We got word of it, and Don Wahey immediately jumped in his car with the logistics man, we'll call, from Taylor, and they went down there to try to assess the damage and see what happened and settle things down.
After witnessing the scene, Wahey agreed to a televised interview.
It's a devastating experience to witness something like this. I would find it hard to think that what we are engaged in here would have any value other than something that would be to the well-being of the world.
Akron sent a message. It was time to go yet again. But as he prepared to leave, Wahey wrote a final letter to Taylor. I wish to personally thank you for your kind understanding. I look forward to being able to quickly return to restart our operations. The next day, an official at the U.S. Embassy in Monrovia cabled to Washington describing Wahey's last meeting with the warlord. Taylor said that he was sorry to see Wahey go, that the plantation had been the lifeblood of Greater Liberia. As it turned out, Taylor would never manage to capture Monrovia. But after 4 more bloody years of war, Taylor would run for president and win.
The mantra was, at the time, He killed my ma, he killed my pa. I will still vote for him.
They had the perception that if he didn't win, he would start fighting again. And what they wanted was the war to stop. So they were pretty sure that he wouldn't stop in any other way than by becoming president, so they let him be president.
But under Taylor, Liberia descended back into civil war.
He had an opportunity, once he was in power, to try to build a political coalition that would be able to govern the country. But he chose to be dictatorial, and I think that was his undoing.
Taylor's ambitions to establish a greater Liberia expanded to neighboring countries. He crossed into Guinea, and in Sierra Leone continued to finance and arm rebels known for raping and dismembering civilians. His pursuit of timber and diamonds fueled the conflict. 300,000 died.
This was a regime that was unlike anything I'd seen anywhere. It was like if you gave a country to a serial killer. That's what it felt like.
Liberia's Truth and Reconciliation Commission took 3 years to interview thousands of victims, but no one was prosecuted.
There are people who have been responsible for atrocities, for murders. Many of those people are not only walking the streets, but are actively engaged in government in Liberia today.
John T. Richardson lives outside Monrovia. He has never been charged with any crimes related to the war.
This was a civil uprising. Everybody's in it. Does it make it right? Does it make it wrong? Like you said, to the spoils go the victim.
Investigators estimate that during his presidency, Taylor siphoned off anywhere from $280 million to $3 billion. Eventually, he would be arrested and tried at The Hague, but not for crimes committed in Liberia, but for his role in the war in Sierra Leone. Though at his trial, he was questioned about Firestone.
Now, Harbel is the location for what economic activity?
Harbel is the location of the Firestone rubber plantation.
And what was the significance of capturing that?
Oh, you had immediately a means that would provide the needed financial assistance that we needed for the revolution.
How?
Well,
Taylor said that Firestone gave him economic and political capital at a critical juncture in the war.
so once we captured Harbel, we then made it very clear to the Firestone Plantation Company that they could no longer be permitted to exercise allegiance to the government in Monrovia. So it became, at that particular time, our most significant principal source of foreign exchange.
Firestone says it was powerless to prevent Taylor from occupying the plantation, and that at no time did the company have a collaborative relationship with him.
The accused has been found responsible for acts of terrorism, murder, rape, sexual slavery, cruel treatment, recruitment of child soldiers, enslavement, and pillage.
Taylor is currently serving a 50-year sentence at Franklin Prison in the north of England. As for Firestone, they resumed operations at the plantation in 1996. In the years since, the company has invested more than $146 million to improve the conditions on the plantation. The company remains the largest private employer.
Do I think they have blood on their hands? Yes, I believe they facilitated a warlord in his insurrection and in the atrocities that he created. Sometimes people make decisions they regret. I don't know if Firestone regrets the decisions they made in Liberia during the insurrection. Might want to ask them that question.
Does Firestone regret any of the decisions that it made in Liberia during this insurrection?
Anyone who dealt with Liberia in the period from 1980 to 2003 must have regrets that what could I have done differently? Might I have prevented something? I think the decisions they made, in my opinion, were completely justifiable. And to be very frank, I believe they were the right decisions. Had they not taken those decisions, I think Liberia would be much the worse for it today.
Last month, Firestone and its parent company, Bridgestone, sent Frontline and ProPublica a response to our questions, saying, Firestone's decision to remain in Liberia was very costly for the company. Firestone was able to preserve an important economic asset for Liberia, and we are proud of that.
His countrymen have called him a bloodthirsty madman. Human rights organizations have accused his soldiers of waging a war of terror on the civilian population. They have accused the rebels of conducting a systematic campaign of abduction, rape, and murder. But it is for the widespread amputation of the limbs of their enemies that the RUF will be most remembered.
How can you approve that the combatant, the RUF, are responsible? Everybody who took part in this war, they are responsible, starting from those we call intervention force, Kamajos, soldiers, even the RUF. So there is no need to talk about atrocity.
Freetown, war-torn capital of Sierra Leone. Until recently, Nigerian soldiers of the ECOMOG intervention force watched over a fragile peace here. A heavily guarded house overlooking Freetown. It is here that Sanko returned after the signing of the Lomé peace accords. For a few short months, this house was a focal point of a fragile peace process. And in the end, it was here where the peace process all but collapsed. That ended in early May when 19 unarmed protesters were gunned down outside the house of Corporal Fode Seibana Sanko. He is now in the custody of the Sierra Leonean government. A bus brings in members of Sanko's newly formed party, the RUFP, from the east of the country for a regional congress. It is early March and the signs seem good that Sanko is making the transition from general to politician.
No more war in this country. No more armed struggle. But the war is a political struggle, what you call democracy. Therefore, we should be given chance to form our own political party.
Sanko is our savior, they sing. His political rhetoric strikes a chord here among the poor in Sierra Leone. He preaches an end to the corruption and nepotism that has characterized Sierra Leonean politics since independence. It's the same populist tune he sang when he launched the RUF in the wake of a student revolt 9 years ago and took his soldiers into the bush to wage war on the government.
I have a vision for the people of Sierra Leone. All is to make a revolution, which is progress. Revolution is progress for our people, nothing else.
But the transition from a ragtag rebel movement to a well-disciplined political party capable of winning an election was never going to be an easy one. In a country characterized by one-party dictatorships and military coups, you take what you can get.
You can work together with the devil to give peace to your people. Anybody else?
You prepared to do that?
Oh, yes. Anybody in this country. What about President Keba? I signed Abidjan Peace Accord with him, 96. I used to say, even if it is a monkey in Sierra Leone, I'll sign peace accord with him to give a peaceful, genuine atmosphere in this country. It's necessary.
Sierra Leone has a complex constitutional structure, and for Sanko to stand any chance of winning power through the ballot box, he has to ensure that his party has a presence in every region of the country. As Sanko emerges to address his followers, he seems confident that his final goal is now within his grasp. Until his recent arrest, Sanko was effectively a vice president of the country and in charge of the important Commission on Strategic Minerals, which includes Sierra Leone's vast diamond reserves. The former army corporal and TV cameraman is a charismatic character. It is in part this charisma he uses to inspire his followers for the task ahead.
All right. What you for do with level of organization where they organize yourself in your various constituencies, now you go make you build the party for make it strong.
Accountability is a part of democracy. He enjoys playing the role of a politician. He knows, however, that it is as a general of troops in the field that his real power lies. And so it was that by as early as February this year, long shadows had begun to form over the implementation of the Lomé peace deal. 8 months after its signing, 2/3 of the countryside remained under the control of Sanko's troops, with as many as 15,000 RUF fighters reported to be still underarmed.
It's a very difficult person who is very aggressive, who is very determined to be president at all costs, who feels that he can be president. And at the same time, who was never prepared for a negotiable agreement. He always was prepared for a military. And now he's got a negotiable agreement. He doesn't know how to deal with it. He's found himself in a world in which he cannot understand. So he's afraid to let go. He's very reluctant to let go because he believes that if he lets go, he's going to lose everything he's fought for.
Yeah, Mama. Yes.
British soldiers have played a role in the retraining of the new army, but Britain's contribution has been more controversial. The storm over the illegal shipment of arms to government supporters in defiance of a UN arms embargo in 1997 was a severe setback to Whitehall. At the center of that storm was the former British ambassador to Freetown, Peter Penfold. A close ally of the government, he was rewarded for his support by being made a paramount chief.
The government people, even Britain is arming now the government to teach. And you say disarm, they arming them. You have government troops, you have Kamajos, you have Bintis, you have the former SLA who joined us in the bush. All of them are armed.
Meanwhile, back at Sanko's house, the RUF's publicity secretary, Aldred Collins, took us on a tour that included Sanko's radio room. It is from here that Sanko keeps in touch with his troops in the field. Today, however, no one seems to be answering. Outside on the veranda, Sanko meets with the newly elected party officials from the east of the country. They've come with a shopping list of requirements needed to build a strong party. These include 2 houses, 3 cars, 4 typewriters, a tractor, and shirts for the local football team. And while he admires their gift, it seems as if events outside Sanko's compound are soon to overtake him. Here, Sanko's boys listen to the United Nations spokesman interviewed on the BBC, claiming that the RUF is blocking the UN deployment.
Messages from Chairman Sanko. He has stated on several occasions that we are allowed to go. However, when we send our troops, it turns out not to be the case. So as to why they are stopping us, I could speculate, but I won't. And I would just say, ask the RUF. They're the ones who are blocking our legal deployments here.
Listen, those people, there are a lot of fabrications going on. They are just trying to blame the RAF. We are always saying that let the right thing be done.
The United Nations were not the only ones who were concerned with the direction of Sanko's strategy. On this occasion, a delegation from the Movement for Civil Society has arrived to personally deal with a broad range of civic organizations. The Movement for Civil Society has often played a key role in the struggle to preserve democracy in Sierra Leone. They are credited with influencing the collapse of the military regime in 1998 by mobilizing mass protests in Freetown. It was these protests ECOMOG used as a pretext for its initial intervention that restored Tejan Kaba to power. The Movement for Civil Society is specifically concerned about the recent disarming and seizure of weapons from a contingent of 200 Ghanaian peacekeepers.
And the frequency in arms seizure from UNAMSIL by the RAF in various parts in the country do not send the correct signals that the RAF is adhering to the Lome Peace Accord. Long live the Republic of Sierra Leone. Thank you.